You're listening to Rock Solid People, a podcast by Max King.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
Welcome to Rock Solid People, a podcast where I, Max King, the CEO of Auscare Support, interview amazing individuals in the disability space. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Peter Scutt, the CEO and founder of Mable. Welcome to the podcast, Peter.
Thanks, Max. It's a pleasure to be here.
And so for those of us who don't know, I mean, obviously, I guess as a caveat, as a full admission, Auscare Support do have a relationship with Mable. We have a commercial relationship, so I wanted that to be very clear. But for those who don't know about Mable, Peter, I think we owe your parents a debt of gratitude. That's what's coming out of this. The creation of Mable was as a result of an experience that you had in trying to source support workers for your parents. Tell us about that.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, the origins of Mable really start back in 2013 and with my parents in country New South Wales, in Wagga. You know, Dad being in his 90s and frail, and Mum being in her mid-80s with dementia. And, you know, like most older people wanting to remain living at home. And the experience in terms of support that came with that through larger providers was a rostered workforce that was turning up, you know, on different days of the week, really to help Mum get ready in the mornings. And often it was not a familiar face that would turn up, and it was somebody new. And for Dad, he really liked his privacy. And obviously for Mum with dementia, you know, that certainty was really important, that familiarity, you know, when you have dementia. And so that was problematic for them. And they were saying to you know, the kids, when I'd go home to see them, that we really don't need these strangers in our life. Can you leave us alone? And that was the realization then that, you know, people like my parents, it wasn't about choosing a provider that was going to roster people to do tasks. It was about choosing people. So the vision for Mable was a platform that would connect people with people in local communities around Australia. And if we could make those connections in really transparent ways and with safeguards in place, then that would be super empowering for people like my parents, but also for the people that were providing support. And it could really deliver much better outcomes to everyone involved.
Wow. Well, that's great. And actually, it's one of the interesting facts of that I've come across since I've been in this space. The reliability of that rostered staff from the larger providers is often in question. I think, you know, there is, I don't know, and this is me just spitballing here a little bit with you, Peter, but has there been any concept around the reliability of Mable versus the engagement of those big providers? I'd be interested to see how much more reliable workers from the platform are than if they're from the larger providers. I don't know if you've got any thoughts or evidence on that.
Yeah, look, I think it's one of the concerns people often have when they start to move into a new model is what happens if the people I'm engaging directly can't turn up on a particular date. And that's obviously a reasonable concern to have, you know, notwithstanding the fact that traditional provider models have often struggled to guarantee that they'll have somebody turn up because, you know, there is often a shortage of workforce in the sector and they're not able to guarantee service delivery. But what we've found is, you know, Mable's really about enabling small business to come into this sector, small business including sole traders. And when it's your own business, you have to take a lot of care and responsibility for your clients in order to have a business. So we find people rise to that challenge and they take that responsibility quite seriously. So what we say to people engaging support via the platform is always have a team, so you have redundancy within your team. But we're also saying to those independent service providers, you know, you need to have other people you work with that your clients are familiar with, that if you can't turn up for any particular reason, you've actually thought about, you know, how I might solve that problem myself. And then obviously Mable over time has come up with additional solutions. So we've launched Mable Last Minute, where if you did find that you needed support on a short notice because somebody in your team wasn't available, you know, then you could find somebody quite quickly through Mable Last Minute. But the actual other benefit of Mable Last Minute is people aren't forced to live these rostered lives anymore, that they could actually do things spontaneously and decide, oh, somebody's invited me to dinner tonight. Can I get the support tonight to go? I have a medical appointment tomorrow. Can I find the support at the last minute? So it's really about adding a lot of flexibility so people can live, you know, ordinary lives and be able to do things spontaneously as well and not just be reliant on when I've got my support worker rostered for this week. And that's one of the real benefits of connecting people directly and allowing them to form a relationship together in you know, local communities and services that are quite personal to people. is you allow flexibility on both sides for the support provider and the person seeking support. So it actually allows support to much more fit in with people's lifestyle than the other way around.
And I think we are fully aware of this, but it also means that there's a financial incentive. We know that providers have to make their clip on any engaged support workers, whereas the Mable model is a much more efficient one, I believe. And so it enables people to earn more by doing the same task or the same role or the same job than if it was traditionally on a provider engaged in providing support staff.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think one of the benefits of enabling, again, small business to come into this sector is, small businesses sort of operate locally, they're part of their community, they're much more flexible and responsive to their clients' needs, but also they operate with lower overheads, right? So they typically have a business that they can run at lower costs. So they set their own rates on Mable, taking into account those lower overheads. And Mable as a platform is, again, lowering the overhead of people coming to the sector. It's really, for small business, it actually is a marketing channel. It brings safeguards to the table. It helps them administer their payments and invoicing process and record keeping. So Mable as a platform is really encouraging a whole diverse set of new people to come into the sector that are attracted by, the ability to work on their terms and to have a lower cost structure, which means that they can earn more ultimately, and the person needing support gets more hours of service.
Yeah, and this is not a scheduled question, but if I was to come to the Mable platform and hadn't got any experience, is there and I've read recently a learning hub, is that a way of facilitating, I guess, training or development of an individual that hasn't previously had the experience in the industry?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that the NDIS is really trying to encourage and to create awareness around is the fact that support looks quite different under the NDIS than the way it might have looked previously. So people with a disability have described it to me as, I used to get support to live, now I get support to live a life. And the sorts of support I need is quite diverse. And so it opens up opportunities for people in communities everywhere to come into this sector to provide, support to other people. And some of that support may be, services that are more entry level. In fact, when you're trying to live an ordinary life, you can benefit from all sorts of life experience that people have around living independently, personal grooming, travel training, etc. So people can come into the sector without necessary qualification. But what they can do through the Learning Hub is they get foundations in the disability sector, foundations in aged care, foundations in running their own small business. They can upskill in a whole lot of areas around, understanding autism or working with people with dementia. And then if they really love what they're doing, this is ultimately what we're trying to do, is bring people into the sector that love what they're doing and give them a pathway to not only professional development, but credentialed learning opportunities. So where I go and get a micro skill that allows me to offer personal care and then grow my services over time, so I can sort of earn and learn in the sector.
Yeah. And as you say, it may be that you find your niche in an area that you didn't expect to. And I guess one of the things that I saw quite quickly on the Mable platform that I was always keen to explore more of was that, as you said, the niche idea, that sort of conceptually, you can find someone LGBTQI friendly who likes pets and wants to go to the footy on a Friday, that sort of nuanced stuff that previously you might find one of those, and now you can sort of tick all the boxes of things that you want, particularly for those people in those minorities, whether it be a cultural linguistic one or whether it be, as I say, LGBTQI, something that was previously kind of unexplored from a support perspective.
Yeah, no, I think the reality is, to do that well, you've got to bring large numbers of people together, right, and connect them locally, because everyone's an individual. Everyone has, personal preferences and needs and interests, and that's true for both the person that needs support and the person offering support. So if we're really talking about relationship-based, care and support, then genuine relationships form, from people that have mutual choice, that have respect for each other, that have common interests, that like each other. And so through giving the power of choice to both parties, you're much more likely to have genuine relationships emerge. And that's what I think is important in the platform. So people, can find people within their community to connect with. It's encouraging people from communities everywhere to come into this sector. So I think it's a really powerful concept. And as the NDIS moves from sort of that enrollment phase to trying to drive outcomes and more inclusion, then the diversity of people that are needed and the relationships that need to form in the sector become more and more important. And so I think the potential for Mable to make a difference, I think we're only in the start of that journey.
And speaking of that, I mean, the next question I have for you is challenges. I mean, you've had to overcome a few of them, and I was just keen to understand how do you keep coming back to overcome the challenges that you must have faced?
Yeah, look, I think it's, if you're doing something innovative, if you're trying to bring a new concept to bear, then there are a lot of challenges. And, one of them is just, the whole education challenge around with people seeking support and people that are willing to offer support and communities everywhere getting to understand, the NDS is actually offering you an opportunity to think differently, and platforms like Mable are trying to unlock that for you. That's a journey. It's going to take some time for people to, understand what they want to do differently. And certainly for Mable, we've focused on trying to make it really simple to use and engage with. But obviously, it's quite a complex undertaking. So, we need to attract all sorts of talented people across engineering and product and data and marketing and community engagement, operations. You need to bring all of these people with amazing commercial experiences, but have them come all into Mable attracted through our purpose and our vision. And, hopefully out of that mix of people and being really focused on putting our community at the center of everything we do and listening to them and trying to understand what their priorities are and what their needs are, you hope you can continually build a product that delivers more and more value to people. And that's obviously an ongoing challenge. I'd say the other thing that, for Mable is, we're going from startup to scale up. So again, that's a very different challenge for the founders. When we start, we're hands-on everywhere. We're in contact with everyone that works in the organization. We're able to translate the vision on a day-to-day basis. But when you're, well over 100 people going to 200 people, you've got to actually lead the company in a different way and really try and be much more involved in the strategy and getting alignment and connecting people to our purpose and trying to continue to have talent come into the business.
But at the same time, not sort of be removed from the front line, so that you're you're in your ivory tower and you're not in touch with what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, and you've got to keep a really flat organization and bring your community into the business all the time, right? As you grow in terms of scale, you've got to constantly be working very closely and listening very closely to your community, because really Mable's one big co-design project. And so I think that's one thing that we are all committed to in the company is staying close to our community, listening, asking, observing, and trying to really build solutions that matter to people.
Yeah, and actually that's one of the questions I had for you is, how has the Mable marketplace developed to meet the needs of participants? I'm sure it's slightly different to the original vision that you had, or albeit that it's nuanced rather than necessarily a fundamental shift. But the developments of the Mable marketplace, what would you say are the key sort of, I guess, community-driven, developments?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, right? We have design teams that are constantly working with our community. We have community engagement teams that are constantly talking to our community. We have a team of people on the phones that are constantly talking to our community. And so, you're constantly trying to develop insights from all of this feedback and qualitative information that's coming into the company. And, you start to realize the sorts of things that are important. So I gave you that example earlier where we developed, Mable Last Minute, for example, partly to overcome this element of redundancy, but also partly to respond to this feedback we're getting that, people didn't want to live rostered lives. They needed more spontaneity in their life and needed to be able to do things that are win. And so that was part of, delivering that as a solution. So you start to, get insights from the way your community is engaging with the product. And, one of the things we see increasingly going forward is that people are on a journey of discovery, right? Our community is on a journey of discovery about what's possible, what's a life of meaning and purpose for them, or what's a good life for them. And so, one of the things we think about Mable is how do we help them on that journey of discovery? How do we help them find what's possible in their community, to trial things, to experiment with things, and, ultimately help people on that journey of defining what their life's going to be all about.
Mm. And I think, that's, as we've been working with you since I think it was 2017, 2018. So we've seen some of those participant journeys that have developed into just business as usual. It's life as usual. So it's not an exploration anymore. It's just, this is how my life is, and this is the people who support me on that. And it's been wonderful to see that kind of just become embedded, become a natural, in harmony with someone's, as you say, what they had wanted from an ordinary life or a normal life. And certainly that Mable last minute, I mean, has been fantastic. It's as you say, it happens to anybody in the normal course of things. Things change, or you get invitation to last minute, or you get a cancellation at a restaurant and you want to get a table, and those sorts of things that happen. So that's wonderful. But if I could just ask you, maybe just to remove the Mable lens and just come out a little bit, and just to talk to me about, I've always been a huge fan of the NDIS. We love what we've seen, the developments we've seen. It's not always perfect, granted. But in terms of the NDIS landscape, with regards to, obviously, the support workers and how they benefit, what do you see in the next, I know it's a big lens, but 3 to 5 years of the NDIS?
Yeah, it is a big lens. It's obviously a major reform that's evolving. It's in motion. And I think, the broad change for me is the move from the enrollment phase of the scheme to really trying to drive outcomes. So to me, it's all about, how does the scheme deliver on the promise for people living a more inclusive life, socially and economically, and are we able to drive, those outcomes? And that's what the scheme is intended to do. Again, I guess the origin of the scheme is it's not a welfare scheme so much as this insurance or investment scheme that if we invest in people with a disability, we can reduce, their lifetime dependency and create more economic participation, and that's everyone's, goal. So for us, it's about, how do we be involved in that transition to driving outcomes? And so it'll be interesting to see over the next few years about I think we've got to see increasingly diverse services that come into the sector to help people on that journey. So I still think we're going to see a lot more change. I think that's why we're excited about small business coming into the sector and being much more innovative and responsive to people's needs. But, we'll start to see things like people being able to search for services, I think, based around the goals in their life. What are the services available that can help me achieve my particular goals, and how do we connect them with those services? So we certainly see that as a big change going forward. I think really this whole education around attracting people from communities everywhere into the sector, I think that's going to be a big part of the scheme going forward. We know that there's still chronic workforce or service shortages. That's on top of a lot more home care packages being released, which is going to compound the workforce shortage. So how we actually attract the workforce and the diversity of people and services to the sector, I think, is going to be a big challenge again. That's why I think Mable's quite an exciting part of that story.
Yeah, and I think for me that's exactly it. Part of the challenge is that there's the perception of the work as being not something that everybody wants to do, and that's the reference to sort of personal care that everyone always makes the reference to, that classic sort of cliche of that personal care and not being paid enough. But I think the Mable platform and the ability, as you say, to have a diverse range of shifts that you're undertaking will mean that there is an opportunity for that workforce shortage, I guess, to be addressed, or certainly Mable would contribute to that in my view. But there is still a fundamental shortage. We have I'm based in the Highlands, as you know, and it's chronic here. I can only imagine as you start going more remote, even to where you mentioned your parents were in Wagga, that must be even challenging. I mean, we've got Campbelltown 40 minutes away. There's a large population there, and there's a lot of housing development between here and there. So, we're addressing some of those issues. I'm not sure exactly in Wagga if you're ever going to get the population explosion that naturally leads to more people working in the sector.
Yeah. Look, it's not going to happen overnight, right? It's again, a journey of the sector developing, I think, and we're putting in as much investment as we can in communities everywhere in terms of creating awareness, really trying to, I think it's really important that people see the possibilities differently in terms of support work in the disability sector, that people understand, it's not just personal care that people might have thought about in the past, but, what does it take to live independently? What does it take to find a job? There's many skill sets needed here that people everywhere can contribute to. And I think if we if we give people the opportunity to work, flexibly, to work on their own terms, to be able to earn more, to connect directly with, relationships in their community, we're going to attract a lot more people. And for us, it's still about creating awareness. We're still in the early journey of creating awareness for people that need support and people that want to offer support, that they can do things in very different ways than what's happened historically. And it's, never the case that there should be one model here. It's people are diverse on both sides of the sector. And so the more diverse models we have, the better. The more we'll sort of provide solutions, the more we'll attract service providers.
Mm. Yeah, and look, I think as I said, you are definitely a leading light in that respect. The Mable platform, and we know of other platforms that have tried to I guess have their take on the innovative approach that we know that the NDIS is encouraging. Look, I've also, when I was Googling you to try and introduce you and then just look at some of the background, but there are some detractors from the Mable platform, and I'm keen to understand. I mean, obviously, we're huge fans. I don't want this just to be a Mable, a Mable-a-thon, but there are criticisms out there and detractors. How would you respond to those?
Yeah, no, I think whenever you're doing something new, there'll always be people that are willing to sort of criticize or question. And I think we've got to be confident in what we're delivering and being able to sort of, actually clarify or break down what's real about those criticisms and what's not. Thankfully, from dealing with our community, we're listening to them and talking to them every day, and we're trying to resolve complaints and incidents. So I think we have a really positive reputation amongst our community, and that's borne out by the growth of the business and ratings and reviews that we're receiving on the service providers, or NPS scores, or the Trustpilot reviews. I think the model really works and it's delivering good outcomes. But certainly, I think there's some people that are criticizing models like ours and trying to link it to gig economy models, for example, and link it to models like Uber and Deliveroo. And we're very clear to say we're nothing like those models. We might be an online platform, but we're not in the middle of people dictating terms or setting rates. We're a very different sort of platform that connects people directly. And it's really about bringing small business into this sector, which I think is fundamentally really important in these workforce shortages. So sometimes I think criticisms in associated areas, can be linked back to us, but it's really just a misunderstanding what the Mable platform's all about. And from our perspective, our long-term future is about enabling better outcomes for people that need support and better outcomes for people that offer support. And that's fundamental to what we're delivering and, looking to build over the long term.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, you know that I'm a huge fan. I think that the way that we came across Mable, that we had 5 individuals that were trying to get out and were unable to leave the group home that they were in. And we reached out to the Mable platform to find 5 unique support workers to support them. That was the original sort of how I came across Mable. And I have to say, there was no other innovative approach back then. And since then, we've seen the growth of the platform and the growth of your team. And I'm, as you know, a huge fan. And Peter, thank you very much for your time. I wish you all the best in the next, as I say, few years to watch you grow and the platform grow and your team grow.
No, thanks, Max. I've appreciated the opportunity to, know you over many years and the thinking you have at your end and the appreciation for innovation. So I look forward to continuing to work on moving, the sector towards the outcomes envisaged by the NDIS at the very beginning. So exciting times ahead.
It is. And thank you very much, Peter Scutt, CEO and co-founder of Mable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to Rock Solid People. For more interviews, stay tuned.